So I have to admit that I don't do this often,
Hmm.
but I have three versions of this book. Welcome to the Book Angle, where we talk about books from different angles and sometimes go in circles. I'm Anna, and this is Sabrina. And today we're going to be talking about a book, Where the Dark Stands Still, by A.B. What is the last name?
Poranek?
Poranek?
Por Pornick?
Um, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it.
A fun fact about this book, most of the characters and the names, everyone is Polish, and I'm pretty sure the author's Polish, and we are not. So
Yeah.
we're gonna try our best with our pronunciations of this book. But look how beautiful. I was showing Anna. The cover is just so gorgeous. In the back too.
Yeah,
Man.
my copy is sitting right up there. Mine has the
Mm.
blue title because I bought it from Barnes and Noble and they had like a their own version for whatever reason.
This is a book where if I was judging the book by its cover, man, totally would grab it. Just be like, let me see what this is about. But so we're doing a book review. We haven't done this in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a
How do you
while.
feel? What do you want to start with? What category?
Well, part of me is like I was about to start right at general reading experience and I was like, no, that we
You
need
don't
to
want
go.
to?
Well,
Okay.
we
Okay.
need to go in order. Always start with
Okay.
characterization.
All right. All right.
I will
We'll see
say
how we feel.
I picked this book up purely because of the art that I saw of it. The author was showing on TikTok. And I was like, that looks really interesting based off of the artwork, and it was like the cover artwork.
Hmm.
Um, so I did get drawn in purely because of the cover, and then I read the synopsis. But I was like, this is really interesting. I think I'm gonna give it a try, and I think it might be end up being my favorite read of 2024. It's my current favorite read of 2024, so we'll see if it stays that way. But first, characterization.
I well, for it was a five. The characters in this book are really fantastic. So we have Liska, who I listened to the audiobook for that one, so I knew that was right. Liska is her main character, and I just felt like she was like kind of precious. Like I don't know how to explain it, but she was just a lovable character who I felt like was so kind to everyone around her. She was like really humble because the main premise of this book, maybe we should start with that. We just told you how much we liked it. But Liska is someone who she has magic. And magic where she's living is looked down upon. They view it as something demonic and bad. And so there's a legend that every is it 50 years or every century? There,
Every 100 year?
every 100 years, I think, you can go and find this thing that allows you to affirm, that allows you to make a wish, and it will come true. So Liska's wish is she doesn't want to have magic anymore. And along the way, she meets the Leshi. That's how my audiobook said it, the
Mm-hmm.
Leshi, who is actually a demon, and then they strike up a bargain.
Yeah.
That's the synopsis. But Liska, she's not one of those like people in books that's like, I want my magic. She's like, get it away from me. And then I felt like the Leshy was just really complex and had a lot going on. And I was constantly trying to figure out why is this demon nice and not nice? Where does he go all day? But my favorite character was Yaga, which is a house
Mm-hmm.
spirit at Leshy's house, and she sometimes turns into a cat, and that just made me happy too.
Well, she
So
is the form of a cat. Like,
yes.
she's.
At first she's not though. And then she changes.
I think she's the form of the cat the whole time, right?
I
I
don't
have
know.
to say, okay, I have to say, I have read 9 books since I finished this one. So the details are a little fuzzy. I do remember her being a cat.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe she wasn't when we first meet her. She's like a house. Yeah. This is very inspired by Polish folklore. And a lot of it was familiar to me because I've read things like Uprooted And no, I haven't read The Witcher, but I played the video game, and there's a lot of overlap in like there's a Leshi in The Witcher that you end up having to fight because it's a very typical, well, not typical, it's a forest demon in Polish folklore. So he's a little bit more humanized in this story than
Mhm.
The Witcher, but there's a lot of like, oh, I recognize this kind of creature from this lore that I had already consumed elsewhere.
Mhm.
But I also felt like the characters were a five, and I don't know if Yaga was my favorite, but I loved the voice for her for the audiobook.
Yes. Yep.
I loved all of the characters. It's very found family,
Mhm.
and kind of has a cozy feel because of that, even though a lot of the stuff that's going on is not cozy.
Mhm.
Um, but it was still like heartwarming at times. And there were moments where I was like genuinely like kind of laughed out loud because it was funny.
Mhm.
Their interactions and just like how they care for each other as they get to know each other and kind of grow as this family that's living in this very strange house in a very strange circumstances.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, Yaga probably it was. I was inspired by the Audible reader. So I actually really highly recommend the audiobook as well if you're reading, because as someone, I don't have any familiarity with Polish folklore. Just hearing it and reading it made me make connections with some of these terms, creature names that I was unfamiliar with. I was able to associate, oh, okay, this word is for this particular demon in this forest, and it just really helped. But Yaga's voice actor was fantastic. Or I think it was the same person, but it was wonderful. And they were all just so great. And the
Yeah.
found family aspect was very heartwarming and it felt really natural. I feel like some found family is forced, and it didn't feel forced in this book.
No. I will also give a shout out to the house, which is its own kind of character.
Mhm.
And I just love when houses kind of take on some personality when it's done well, and it was done really well and here as well.
Mhm.
Okay, so next is plot. How did you feel about the plot?
So this is one where I'm gonna hurt your soul a little bit, but I still really liked it. So Um, it was a five all the way until the last 30 pages for me. And I don't think any of the beginning needs to change. So it was definitely a five. I felt like it needed 50 more pages because there is a decision that needs to be made at the end of the book. And it's a good decision. There's nothing wrong with the ending. I just felt like I needed more space in order to accept that the ending was happening, if that makes sense. Because it felt slightly abrupt. But again, there was nothing that needed to be changed about the beginning. There was nothing that needed to be changed about the ending. I just would have liked a little bit more build up. So I ended up giving it a four in plot. But if I had those extra, like, and maybe I didn't even need 50 pages, 30 more pages, it would have been a five. So I know
Yeah.
you don't agree with me, but how do you feel?
Well, I just didn't. I never felt like the pacing was off for me. I was also. I feel like part of it too is I was switching between audiobook and Kindle version for a while, and I was towards the end listening to the audiobook, and because of that, it felt a little bit slower. Not because the pacing was slower, but just because like the way I could consume it took more time.
Mhm.
And so it never felt slow or never felt too fast for me because I was like, what's gonna happen? Like I need to listen faster because I was
Mhm.
driving home and I couldn't just like pull over on the side of the road and start reading. So um so I think that influenced my feelings on that pacing issue
Mhm.
because I personally was like I need to know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Um so I felt like it was a 5, but I'm not hurt by you feeling like it was
Okay.
a 4.
I was like, oh gosh, let's see how this goes.
I really have no major critiques for plot. Like sometimes there's errors that you're like, wow, that really stood out to me as something that needed to be fixed or like caused issues for me as a reader, but nothing here. It was like well done.
Mhm. It was a really well done plot. And when we're talking about pacing, that's why it was so I was sitting there before we met trying to figure out what am I going to give it? Because again, there was no pacing issues until the last decision was made. And I was like, oh, I needed more time to sit with that decision. I agreed with it. I thought it was a good one, but I just needed more time. So it wasn't a pacing issue, but it did alter my general feelings at the end because I was expecting for it to be like, wow, five all the way down. And I was like, oh, wait, hold on here. Hold up. But it still sat with me for a long time, which is a good testament of like, this is a good book if you're
Yeah.
thinking about it once it's finished.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So,
what's our next one? We haven't done one of these
author's
in so long.
voice.
Okay. Oh, okay. Five.
So I really liked how she wove in Polish folklore into this story. And again, audiobook, I can't recommend it enough because there's a lot of terms that are Polish words that you may not know how to pronounce, and hearing them pronounce correctly I felt like is very immersive in this world. And she definitely, like she said in her acknowledgments, that she was influenced by her Polish grandmother, as well as Naomi Novik and Howl's Moving Castle. And before I even read that acknowledgement, I was thinking in my head, this reminds me of Uprooted by Naomi Novik and Howl's Moving Castle and The Witcher, which is Polish. All of those things are like, I was like, man, I really am getting the vibes that she was putting down. And I think that speaks very strongly for her author's voice, was that I could tell what she was influenced by, but not to the point where I was like, this is a complete ripoff of. Not in any way was it a ripoff of any of those stories, but I
Mhm.
could tell that it was influenced by them. And then I went to the acknowledgments and was like, wow, that was absolutely correct. And so I think that that was a really cool little
Yeah.
like tidbit. I don't know what to call that. Like it was just cool to be like, I can see where she got her inspiration as a reader.
Yeah, and thinking just about the general way that it was written, it's not an info dump.
Mm-hmm.
So it's woven in, which is why, again, I liked the audiobook because it was so woven in. It was hard for me to be like, oh, where does that go to? But that's not a bad thing. Once I was listening and reading at the same time, I was able to make those connections. And this sounds like my author's voice is not strong here, but the writing was just pretty. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was beautifully written and the descriptions were just pretty, but not like frivolous or okay, that was too flowery. That's not what I mean. I think you would just have to read it to understand what I mean by that description because it just felt precious and I was excited to read more and everyone was just like cast it in a specific light and it was just well written. And I think that this would be a good book to use whenever we are describing an author's voice
Mm-hmm.
because it was very distinct and that's impressive seeing how this is her debut novel. And I can tell that if I were to read something by her again, I would probably be able to pick it out because of just how it was written.
Yeah. I really feel like she has a good grasp on her technique as a writer. And she, like, the words that she chose were so eloquent. And it kind of reminded me of Ava Reed in a way. It kind of gave me the vibes of her style of writing as well. Um, but I just like felt so immersed in the story because of her word choice. And that, yeah, it was just very strong.
I'm thinking about Ava Reed and A.B. Poranek almost as like yin and yang though, because whereas this one it felt they're similar, they're the
Mm-hmm.
same concept, but this one's kind of like light and pretty, and you're still like, wow, this is great. And Ava Reed, similar style, but normally it's dark. Like
Yeah,
she has
she's
the
very
dark,
dark.
like,
Yeah.
oof, like I feel something lumen,
Yeah.
like, and so they're kind of like the two sides of the same coin, but. the opposites too.
Yeah. And I immediately read Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reed after finishing this book. It was like the next book that I read. And it is an incredibly dark book. Um, but yeah, it is kind of like two sides of the coin. Like one is hopeful and one is not.
Yep.
And Ava Reed is not. Um,
Yeah.
so next, are you done with author's voice?
Mhm.
Next is believability, and I don't know if we need to spend a ton of time here because we've kind of already touched on. But this is like our category where we talk about like, were there any issues that it just felt like it took us out of the story, like the plot didn't make sense because you couldn't believe what was happening, couldn't believe the choices these characters were making. For me, it was a 5 because I
Mhm.
felt like everything she was delivering on the promises that she made from the beginning, and we uncover a lot about why Liska wants to lose her magic, like why is she
Mhm.
being driven so, like she's so desperate to get rid of it. And by the end of the story, I completely understand the decisions that were made and why she wanted to lose it, and what became of that decision, right? So yeah, it was a 5 for me. It's so hard when the books are like a 5 all the way around. It's like, well, I don't have anything bad to say, so it was great. Like,
Yeah, even in this category, because again, when I was thinking about what was I going to give it in each thing, I was like, but because I had the plot issue with a decision, but I believed in the decision.
mm-hmm,
I felt like the decision made sense. So if you're watching and you're like, okay, what is going to happen in the end? It's not a bad ending. I think you will understand why everything happens the way it happens, and I think it's very believable. Um, so I ended up still giving it a 5. I was on the fence, but I'm like, no, I believed it. I believed this whole story. I believed why Liska wanted to get rid of her magic. I believed in like the Leshi and what he was all about and why he was doing what he was doing. I believed in the world, the village that she was a part of. In a way, it almost reminded me of like the Salem witch trials of people when they hear about witches and magic and the deep themes of like religion taking over and
mm-hmm,
just pray the demons away. So it was kind of interesting. And I think because of that context I already remembered, it also made it very believable. And I'm sure they have their own versions of that in
mm-hmm.
Poland folklore. But yeah, it's a 5.
Okay. So last is general reading experience. Um,
What do you guys think?
so I have to say, I have to admit that I don't do this often,
Mhm.
but I have 3 versions of this book. And
Oh,
I,
yeah.
because I
Hmm.
first got it on my Kindle and I started reading it and I had to leave for a long trip. And I was like, I don't want to stop reading this. So I'm just going to get the audiobook and listen to the audiobook. So I did that. And then I don't have a bookstore in my town. I was traveling and was near a bookstore, and I was like, I'm just gonna see if they've got a physical copy because it's really pretty, and I know that I like it enough that I'm probably gonna want a physical copy. So I also got a physical copy. So I have supported this author well.
Yeah.
um, and I don't regret having all 3 versions because
I don't regret my decisions.
yeah. Because like I said, it is so far my favorite read of the year. And I have some books coming out this year that I'm really excited to read, but this is a very strong contender to be my favorite book of 2024.
Yeah, I actually only own one version myself because I have the Audible version. And when for general reading experience, it's do you like it enough to buy it for someone else? Well, this isn't my copy. I actually bought it for my friend. And funny enough, I bought it for her before I even read it, just because Anna had already read it. She loved it so much, and it was just getting rave reviews. And I was like, well, if I give this to my friend, she'll also let me borrow it. So she loved it, and we have both recommended it to other people. So basically, in my like hometown area, we're just passing along this copy and reading it, but I'm still probably going to buy my own physical copy just because I really believe anyone who's listening, I just strongly recommend reading and listening at the same time. And I want my own copy. It's pretty. I want it on my shelf.
Yeah.
Probably gonna reread it soon. Um, but for yeah, definitely a 5 because it's good enough to recommend to other people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So for you, it's a 5 all the way down. For me, I think I did the math and it's like a 4.6 or 4.7. So round it up to a 5. Um, and I really hope that this author has something else coming for us. Hopefully, somewhat soonish at some point.
Yeah. For right now they're an insta read author for me. Like I will read anything they put out. So yeah, I
Yeah.
really hope that they've got something coming cuz we really loved
Yeah.
it. So
There are these TikToks though that make me laugh. Slight tangent where it's like author spends 5 years
yeah.
writing book for audience to say, when's your next one coming out? Like a
Like
month later.
yeah.
And I don't want to do that to you. But if you post something, once you take your time, I will read it. I'll read it. But definitely, if you've seen this book, if you've heard about it, we both recommend that you check it out for yourself. Pick it up. I don't know. It's great. You won't regret your decisions. Maybe you'll be like Anna and have 3 versions.
Yeah.
So, on that note, thank you so much for watching and
Like and subscribe.
bye.
Bye.